G'day, folks. It is the coach here. I hope you are all taking names in the name of whatever god you follow. We follow too. We follow the same god, it turns out. I am here with Age of Something, aka Matt. We were both just at a tournament. We just came back from Bathurst GT. Although I don't know if I'd call it a GT, if I'm being honest. It was like 40 odd players. So a bit of a humble stretch to be called a GT, but we've just come back from this tournament, and I thought it'd be a good chance to kind of do a bit of a recap. I used to do recap videos, and it took a lot of time. It was kind of boring when I'm talking to myself doing a recap. So I thought, let's get a guest on, and I thought, what better way to talk about this Bathurst with a fellow Stormcastian. But do you want to introduce yourself? Who is Age of Something?
I'm Matt. You may have seen my YouTube channel, Age of Something. Most likely you've seen some artwork of mine or some clips of mine that have been stolen and stuck on Twitter somewhere. That is what it is. But yeah, I have a very stupid YouTube channel that's mostly just bad jokes, which I'm the only one who's doing it apparently for Age of Sigmar, so it's a beautiful little niche I've carved myself.
It's if anyone hasn't seen Age of Something, it's a little short 2-minute animation. You often like introduce a faction, but it's all kind of like, you got a very unique art style. It's very one-dimensional,
Quick.
Almost like lawyer grid paper. It's very fun. It's a lot of fun. Like, you get that hey whoa kind of comedy, memey a little bit, but it's also you'll learn a few things. So a lot of fun. So yeah. Oh, you've got a fan in here. You got Age of Something. Woohoo! But this is we're going to talk Bathurst. Bathurst was yes, indeed, great cartoons. I do thoroughly enjoy it. And actually, I didn't even know you were coming until I actually saw your Twitter. I was on Twitter. I think they just did the list review. So Crutchhammer, the boys at Crutchhammer, set up the tournament. They had done like a little list review. So for the people outside of Australia, you might not know that 99.9% of tournaments in Australia ask you to submit your list in advance, about 2 weeks in advance of the tournament. And many of us will do we'll do like a list review or a discussion, and it's fun seeing people's lists. And that was kind of where I saw there were 2 Stormcast lists. And then I saw you post something about going to Bathurst. Then I put 2 and 2 together, and I realized we're Storm Bros.
Love Stormcast.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Maybe I'll let you talk a little bit. Like, why Bathurst? You traveled literally, for anyone, by the way, Matt is from literally the other side of Australia. So I'm in like the New York of Australia. Matt's over in like the San Fran, although the cultures are a little bit different, Perth to San Fran, but like just the travel distance. But what made you come over, and like what were you expecting, and like what was your perspective?
Yeah, so I came across with 2 of my friends, 2 of my club mates, and part of it is just that, there's been a lot of talk for a while about coming across for a tournament in the Eastern States, and yeah, they decided they just wanted to do a tournament, and then looked at Bathurst and went, you know what, wouldn't it be nice to go for a trip through the mountains in New South Wales as well on the way there, just see something a bit scenic on the way through. Don't think the guys checked that it was 12 hours to get there before we decided to book it all, but that's all right. It was a lovely trip. It was lovely travel, and it was a really good chance for, I think, all of us to experience some tournaments outside of WA, and just kind of see how WA stacks up Australia wide, and just like get a feel for Warhammer in New South Wales, and I guess the eastern states of Australia.
It's always funny because you have your local meta, so like what's happening at the local game store. Then you have like a state-based meta, which often isn't always reflective of what happens at the local scene. And then when you start rolling up into the nationals, you realize that you might be the big fish in the small pond, but when you go up against things like, I haven't played against, insert faction here, or you come up against, that person who runs all the foxes, you're like, there's no one running foxes in my area, and all of a sudden, like, it really blows you out of the water. But it's one thing I really enjoy traveling is actually playing a whole bunch of new players, new lists, seeing how we all kind of mix up. There was plenty of times back in the olden days where there was a band of us New South Wales people would actually travel up to Queensland, which is another state in Australia, and there'd be always like little friendly rivalries, like what can we do and kind of prove ourselves. Did you find the same type of thing? You want to kind of represent Perth and represent WA and see how you guys go against our crew?
Oh, 100%. 100%. You know, it was not something that we wanted to scream about, just in case it turns out that Perth's terrible. We all went 1-4. But no, there was definitely in the group of us, you know, we are three of the more competitive and sort of, as one of the guys put in a Perth chat today, the fiends of Age of Sigmar in Perth. So yeah, we really wanted to kind of represent and do well, and thankfully, even with my performance, we did pretty well. 2-4-1s. That, you know, it was kind of nice to see that we're not too far behind in Perth. You know, I think our top players are, I think, in a similar place to the Eastern States, which is, it's a nice thing to know, right?
No, I dig it. And hey, you know, two 4-1s. I had the pleasure of playing Alex, one of your club mates. Sam, right? Sam was the other one?
Sam.
Yep.
Sam came third for the whole thing, which was very exciting.
Mate, spoiler. We're going to go through our list in our game. We're not going to kind of take, you know, It's not going to be War and Peace. We're not going to go to like every detail. It's not going to be like a battle report, but we're going to bring up the list. We'll bring up some photos from our games. We'll highlight, you know, the top 10 at the end, and just like a bit of a fun little recap of the event. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think despite it being 40 players, and it's quite a small tournament compared to some of the bigger tournaments in Australia.
It's a bit on the bigger end for us, to be fair.
Well, I found it very tight. Like, there were some really good players, and they were struggling at 3-2s, 4-1s, even at the 2-3 levels. Like, you know, you got some really tough matchups. So even though that it was a small field, it was very competitive. So I absolutely want to give a massive shout out, as well as to Blake and to Joel, who ran the event. Absolutely wonderful event, thoroughly enjoyable, and we were about 3 hours out of Sydney. So that's a small country town. Bathurst is known for car racing. They have like the Bathurst 5000 or something. Cars. Well, you know what? Let's get into it. Let's actually talk about it. So, as I said before, folks, what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the lists. We'll go through our rounds. Matt will kick us off, and then I'll kind of follow suit with each round. We'll talk a bit about our games, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Again, it's not going to be War and Peace, but while I kind of bring up the chat, I'll bring up the first list. This was your list. What were you bringing? Why did you bring it? What were you thinking when you put this list together? Talk me through a little bit of this crazy logic, Matt.
So this is kind of a build off of the list I was running all of last season. So last season I had a lot of success here in WA with a Star Drake, 2 lots of Jacrothian Guard list. I had basically a couple of month period where I did lose a game, which was lovely. So this was kind of based on that, but also I guess specifically the Star Drake. Kind of no good now. Purple Sun exists, but also I was very much going hand luggage to get over to Bathurst. So there is absolutely no way that boy is ever getting into hand luggage. So it was a combination of some of the elements I really like within the Stormcast book, and also a list that was kind of based around what are the units that are worth a lot of points, so that I can keep everything nice and neat in a single box. So not all the best for winning tournaments, but you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes.
When you were building this list, what were you expecting? Was there anything in particular in the meta? Was it more about just a force that you could travel with easily? Like, what were you expecting? Because I noticed you got the Redemption Brotherhood. I was kind of surprised to see that particular battalion coming out of the Stormcast book. I certainly haven't run it, but you know, I really like some of the things that you brought in.
Yeah, so I love tech. I love playing with the tech we get in Stormcast. I'm not someone who tends to do a lot of Tzeentch or some of these lists where you've got overlapping buffs over and over again. I like things that singularly operate. So something like the Fast Riders are like a unit I love. because you put them down and they just do their thing, and I don't have to worry about anything else interacting with them. And that's kind of where a lot of my list for Stormcasts live in that world. Hey Blake, where Fulminators don't really need a lot of help to do what they do. I've got some help in there in this list with the Lord Relictor giving them re-rolling ones and the Knight Incantor giving them +1 to wound. But ultimately, if that doesn't go off, a unit of Fulminators on the charge still usually get the job done. We'll talk about that later, but they usually get the job done.
Yeah. We're talking now, like, what did we bring and what were we expecting?
Yeah.
And then as we go through, we can see the reality, right? Because the challenge, and I think you see with Age of Sigmar, unlike 40k, where that you usually have like 1 or 2 factions which blow them, they're the leader in the meta, and then it's all about handling or winning with that faction. Sigmar's always scissor paper rock. It's always scissor paper rock, and you've got to go in thinking like, how do I handle Mega Gargants, Magical Supremacy? What happens if someone turn 1 charges me? What happens if I go up against shooting? What happens if I go up against Nighthawk? And I'll show you my list after Matt's. Is Nighthawk was one of my concerns, and I'd had some bad times with Scarlet Doom in the past, and I'm like, shit, I need some tools for Scarlet Doom. So back to you for a second, because you've got some really interesting things, like there's no Battle Mage of Gur, right? So you often see that with the Dracothian Guard. The Fast Riders, the Castigators aren't something that people normally take, and the good old boys, the Griffhounds, something that I haven't run since first edition, when you could run them for 40 points each. But I know you've been a big fan of them and found a lot of value out of the Griffhounds.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where the list comes from, is the idea that it can take on a lot of different forms of army. You have Fulminators there who do just provide a huge amount of damage. There's not a lot of units that can output the way they do, but I do have a lot of ranged ability, shooting those raptors twice as well. I can usually deal with shooting armies better than they can deal with me, because I can drop. I can keep everything that's important off the board, let them shoot Aether Wings and the Fast Riders. I give them up in that game, and then I come down and try to take everything else off the board and leave my Fulminators, leave what's important untouched. But I can still go to Gargants as well. Part of the idea behind this as well was just having some of these small units, was creating screens when I needed them, created battle tactic stealing units when I needed them. If they went down in the back of the board, steal terrain, or have 2 in the territory. But, there's a couple of different battle tactics that's really useful to have something that can just go in there. I don't want to be trying to do that with Fulminators, essentially. And that even kind of goes into where the Redemption Brotherhood is. You're like asking about, is that the Redemption Brotherhood is there because you can see it on there: Griffhounds, Castigators, Fast Riders. So it's essentially, I can drop 3 things that I don't really care that much about losing straight away and keep my kind of obfuscate still what I'm doing. So it's an army that can be reactive, even though it has a thing that it has a thing that it wants to do. It wants to go straight through you, but it can be reactive to whoever I'm playing against.
By the way, you just reminded me, probably one thing I should call out here, folks, is one thing that Bathurst GT did that I hadn't experienced yet, but I'm actually really glad, and I'd like to see more tournaments do this, is that they focused you only to do battle tactics and grand strategies from the battle plan. So no grand strategies, no battle tactics from the books, no White Dwarf stuff. It's purely the battle plan. How did you find that?
I mean, we don't do any from Stormcast. They're all terrible. So a lot of games were completely normal games to me, because if I'm against an opponent who also doesn't have any good ones, it's just a normal game. I didn't run into Daughters of Khaine or someone like that where it's going to be, where maybe I would have noticed it more. But yeah, I guess for me, I didn't notice it because we have nothing to lose there, essentially.
It was nice that everyone was on the same playing field as so Blake, one of the tournament organizers. Shout out to yourself and Joel. There was another comment earlier to say that one of the best things that by Joel being the TO, Joel is one of the best players in Australia. He has been named in Team Australia for the upcoming Worlds tournament as well. So congratulations to Joel. But it was it was really cool to play, and everyone was on the same playing field. And I think I'm someone who plays with Gits often at my RTT, And it's always a struggle. Like my gits get no special battle tactics, no grand strategies. And I notice when I play with my gits, I'm often at the bottom of my rung, whether I'm 3-0, 2-1, wherever I am on the ladder, I'm always towards the bottom because I don't get the freebies, and it can be the difference maker between certain lists especially like when you got daughters and some of the other ones who have easier battle tactics to score. So it was nice level playing field I found, and I would encourage people to do more of them. Actually, I would happily play another tournament like this.
Yeah, it was cool having that kind of evener, and especially I think with Stormcast, I think being a little bit weak on battle tactics in this edition. We don't really going heavy GVs can be difficult, and we don't for a bunch of demigods. It's surprising how few heroes we have that we can rely on to kill a unit when we need them to.
Yeah, it's actually funny because in my list, is there anything else you want to add to your list? I might actually segue if you don't.
No, I think that's all pretty good.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because one of the things that I did in the lead up to Bathurst was I was putting my Celestant Prime as my general. I was playing around to see, is that an easy battle tactic to score? Because as you mentioned, outside of like Krondus, Karazai, like a Dragon, Draconis, Lord, there's not many killing heroes in it. No.
It's Krondus, Karazai. That's it. That's the two that you can rely on to kill stuff. Everything else is Bastion's 4 attacks. So it's pretty easy to whiff 4 attacks.
Yeah. And like with the Prime, with him being off the board for at least 2 turns, I'm not generating that CP as my general. So I tried it and I'm like, it's not really worth the battle tactic. But this is what I brought. Funnily enough, we both brought Hammers of Sigmar. I went for a little bit different. And the logic and the theory behind my list is I wanted to have 3 key threats. I wanted to have something that had volume. I wanted something that had rend, and I wanted to have something that had mortal wounds. So I have my dragons, for example, which do the rend. I have my annihilators that do the mortals, and obviously Prime does mortal and rend. And I've got my judicators with the crossbow to do the high volume. And one of the cool things that has happened to them is I have 2 attacks each, and exploding hits, not 6s, just hits, turn into 2 hits. So, a unit of 10 can do like 30, 40 attacks, depending on how the dice gods kind of bless you. But on average, they're putting out at least 30 hits. So to handle things like Nighthawk or Hordes or anything that I just kind of need to take down, the Judicators with that high volume attack. But I was playing around with the Chariot. I have some really fast movement with my dragons as well as my chariots. I went a little bit rough, actually. I've been playing with 3-drop lists. So I'd done Bounty Hunters. And before I was just doing Vanquishers and my dragons. And I thought my Annihilators have been good. But I wanted some, if I happen to face a horde like zombies or something, I wanted something to have like the extra damage. So I tried to put my Annihilators in. I think next tournament, I'm going to take them out of Bounty Hunters. I don't think they need to be. I wanted them in there. I wanted to try it. Well, to be honest with you, I haven't seen a lot of people playing. Like most people have either been 3 drops, 1 drop, or a million drops.
There was a lot of high drops at this tournament.
Well, yeah, and funnily enough, actually, I'm not seeing a lot of battle regimen, at least in my local scene. So I thought I was pretty confident that a 4-drop would still give me most of the choices, if not all the choices, of who goes first in the first battle round. And I found that actually, even at 4 drops, I don't think anyone out-dropped me. I think it was always in my control.
Yeah, I believe that.
So, yeah, so I've got I've got the Incantor. I thought I wanted something. And one of the reasons I had the Incantor was I've been burnt 1 too many times against Skaven. I've played Skaven like 5, 6 times since the book has dropped, and like 5 out of 6 of those lists have had Thankwell, and Thankwell with a Narhole and next to Arcane Terrain, which has happened to me a couple of times, is +5 on the cast. So when he gets that boat on +5 to cast, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah,
I wasn't worried about Purple Sun. There was just some of those things like Umbral Spell Portal, like the boat, that I just wanted to say no. And if Purple Sun was really going to be a problem, I could say no. So that was kind of the theory behind it. The Imperatant gave me the 7-inch charge for the Annihilators, which, spoiler alert, disappointed me so often. We'll go through that game. I think anyone who was around me at times, like after a round, would just hear my whinging. I'm just like, fucking Annihilators, bloody Annihilators. They just failed so often. I think they failed 4 out of 5 times. So Annihilators, for anyone who doesn't know, has a 7-inch re-rollable charge. And I think I failed them every time except the last battle round. So, yeah, that's most failures. That's the list. That's the list. And I went with Holy Command, Call for Aid. So one of my vanquishers or liberators could come back to life. So
yeah. So who were you using the Imperatant to drop in as well? Because I know you obviously the Annihilators, but were you using it? Because I'm always really interested in the idea of using something like Vanquishers where they're cheap and using them to steal objectives with the 7-inch. Because no one ever, you tell people to start 7 inches, they maybe do it for the Annihilators, but they never remember for anything else.
And Holy Command as well. So there's been some practice games, for example, against Austin, where I want to score an early battle tactic and I want to kill something. I can drop them early in turn 1, run into a screen, go for that 7-inch charge with the Vanquishers because they are Thunderstrike. The Liberators can't do that. And if they die, that's okay. I will use the Holy Command, bring them back to life. It was a card up my sleeve, but not necessarily one that I would use. It wasn't a strategy. Like I was going to do it all the time. It was just something I had up my sleeve.
Yeah, I love Call for Aid.
There you go. There's Blake reinforcing every time I checked in your game.
That checks that, yeah.
So like against Blake, I had a 5-inch re-rollable charge with my dragon. I rolled double 1 twice. I rolled double 1. I re-rolled it because the dragons once per game can re-roll. Roll the double 1 again. I think in Discord I said to people, I'm like, I'm throwing Stormcast in the bin. I'm sick of them. I hate Stormcast so much, but they're a lot of fun.
That's good, mate.
Do you want to get to your game? Do you want to get to the games?
Yeah, let's look at the games.
Otherwise, it's just going to be a massive whinge. But look, it was a great tournament. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had some wonderful games as well. All 5 of my games were fun. And we're going to kind of go through them and we'll show you the lists of our opponents and give a bit of a recap of what happened. So first off, this was your first opponent. You went up against James Kennedy, which was a Nighthawk Scarlet Doom list.
Yes, so big Nagash and a lot of Blade Geists. This was an interesting game. James was a lovely young man. I think they said he was the newest inductee of Crutchhammer at the end of the tournament, which would be good for him.
Can I just say, James has massive grapefruits to run Nagash in Nighthawk, where Nagash doesn't have a ward. It grinds my gears that the Lord of Death has no deathless save. So again, James, you got big grapefruits for putting in half your army points into one model with no ward.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think James is quite new, which probably showed in our game, unfortunately, because he took first, dropped all of his stuff in my back line, and as you always do when you try that, failed every single charge. And unfortunately left Nagash wide open, which meant I took him out first turn. And when you've got a model that's half of your army and you lose him in the very first round, that's it was very much, that game was very much one round of play and probably just 3 rounds of me kind of mopping up points. But he was a lovely opponent, and it was, I guess for me, it was nice to get a win on the board really early. Getting over to the Eastern States because I wanted to do well and, didn't want to go like 2-3 or something.
Could you tell what James was trying to do? So I think James is in the chat, by the way. G'day, James. Saying he's the king of turn one failing charges.
Yeah.
I imagine what Nagash wanted to do, a lot of arcane bolts, multicast arcane bolt, go in, just do a whole bunch of damage.
Yeah, it was very much I think he took the chance to just why is my wife in chat? What are you doing? You're supposed to be working still. There was that dedicated effort to just strike straight away and really just blow me off the board. And you're running Stormcast as well. Blade Geists in Scarlet Doom are scary because there's a lot of mortal wounds, and even with a 6-up ward save, it's not great. And actually, we're playing Prize of Galay, which just there are no objectives on the board at the start, so you don't get a ward until the very end of the game when it's far less useful. So it wasn't the wrong idea necessarily. He failed a lot of charges. I got Nagash, and then he got the next turn, and finally got his Blade Geist into my Fulminators, and then rolled basically no mortal wounds and basically no hits. So I think I lost something like 4 wounds off a Fulminator, and then the Fulminators killed half the unit just standing still. Just one of those games. Just rough. You have a plan, and then sometimes the dice just say no to your plan.
Yeah. Yes, that has definitely been the highlight of my month. That has definitely been the highlight of my month. But it looks like a fun game. Unfortunately, you didn't have many photos, so I can't show them. But you're currently 1-0. You've taken on James. You defeated James. Yeah. Good work there. My first game was against Skaven. So I'm now at like 7 games with Skaven since the book has dropped like yesterday. But this was a really interesting one. I got to play 3 Warp Lightning Cannons. And you will see the madness that is what, like 6 rattling guns, 8 rattling guns, something what 1, 2, 3, 4, like 8 rattling guns. Absolute insanity. So basically, as I got to the table and Jared said, this is gonna end quickly. Either you're gonna die really quickly or I'm gonna die really quickly. Who knows what's gonna happen? And spoiler, it actually went through to game 5, round 5. It was a really tight game. He did a whole bunch of shooting. Yes, as the chat said, a lot of Daka. Those, and for anyone who hasn't experienced the Warp Lightning Cannon, this is something of a roller coaster. So basically, you roll a dice, and that is your power dice. So if you roll a 2, you then get to roll 6 dice, and anything that is 2 or more would do a mortal wound. So if you roll a 5, you're going to do a whole lot less mortal wounds. If you roll a 1, then it's a guaranteed 6 mortal wounds from each Warp Lightning Cannon. And there's some shenanigans there with the Warlock Engineer and the Arch Warlock and things like that, with like more warp power. But it was basically all of the Scryer are going to mortal wound me off the board. And to your point, both of us are Hammers of Sigmar. And Hammers of Sigmar gives us a 6-up ward if we're within 12 inches of the objective. And in turn 1, there's really there's one objective on the table. And the Prize of Galette, once every battle round, another objective kind of comes up on the board. So as he's mortal wounding me off the board, I have no ward saved. So he was kind of winning the momentum early on, and he was just mortal wounding. The highlight for me, ironically enough, was he's in the chat too, so he's gonna have a laugh. He's gonna laugh at himself again. So my prime comes down. I think it was turn 3. And, like Jaren was kind of winning in the first couple of rounds, and kind of it was, end of round 2, we're on 7 each. Come to round 3, we're at 10 each. So it's been quite a tight game. Things are dying here and there, but my prime comes down, and I think that was at the start of turn 3, and then, or maybe it was either the bottom of turn 3, and whatever it was, he had 1 lone rattling gun there, 65-point idiot. And he overcharges all of them. So he gets to roll an extra dice. So you roll 4d6, and that's the amount of attacks you do. And I think if you overcharge it, it does 2 damage apiece. And if you roll double, it just dies at the end after it's done its shots. So the prime comes down, gets shot off by a rattling gun. It has 1 wound taken so far. So 7 wounds left, 3 up armor save, 4 up ward. 7 damage goes through. I fail all of my saves, which turns into 14 ward saves. I failed every ward save. So the prime dies to a 65-point idiot. There's stuff with like the Warpstone Spark and all that stuff. But the point was, my stupid idiot prime died very quickly. But the gods saved me, because his warp lightning cannons, I'm killing them. I'm like, killing the ones at the top. There's one left. It's shooting my dragons off. I've got a dragon on 1 wound left. And twice I've tried to rally it and I've failed. He's got 1 wound left. If I'm going to win this game, I've got to go in and go kill this this last warp lightning cannon that's kind of like holding the board. And I know that if I charge it, it's going to unleash hell and it's going to do 1 mortal wound. So I rally a dragon. So now that I've got 9 wounds up my sleeve, I go in and that swung the game in my way. So absolutely balls to the wall, cracking game, so much fun. It's exactly what you expect with Skaven. It was just insanity.
Yeah, it's a hard list for this. I actually played a 4 warp lightning cannon list at our team's tournament a couple of weeks back, and this is a nightmare for Stormcast because we're so elite, and the amount of mortal wounds it puts through is just if it works, there is no answer.
Well, I think twice he rolled a 1 on his strength level, so it's just like 6 mortal wounds. It's just boom, you're gone.
Yeah,
so
and that's a fulminator. That's 2 annihilators, 2 of the 3 annihilators. It's
almost a dragon. But yeah, so I won that one. I think it was 23-16. I'm looking at my sheet, so it was a closer game than we both thought it was going to be, but it was a lot of fun. So we both won a piece. Game 2 against one of my Discord moderators. It's Jonathan Byrne.
Yeah, this was a quite a tight game. I know Jonathan's in there somewhere. He was calling me out earlier. This one's a tight game. This is the game that's like every tournament there's that one game that you're going to lose sleep over. This is the one for me.
And we also played the Nidus Path. So that's the one where you can teleport from the corners of the field.
Yeah, which is not a battle plan I play regularly. I played it for the first time about a week before we left just to try it. And it was interesting. It did come in handy, but ultimately not enough because I dropped this one. I think the big thing with this one, and Jonathan will agree, there was 2 probably key moments to this one. I started the game with my fast riders. They're 90 points. I usually just use them as chaff unless there's something I really want to teleport to. I looked at this one and how few bodies there are in Gargants and went, these guys are important. They can steal objectives for the rest of the game. This is maybe my most important unit. And then the minute I moved them, completely forgot that, put them right next to a Gargant and lost them. And then speaking with John at the end of the game, we worked out they probably cost me about 4 or 5 victory points because of the number of empty objectives just sitting around in the last 3 rounds. It was a very bad move by myself. The other probably really big moment in this was that I managed to roll a huge 11-inch charge. I needed 11 to get my fulminators into one of his Gargants. I forget which one. Might have been the Gatebreaker, actually. But yeah, made a huge charge into one of the Gargants with my fulminators. Unbelievable dice roll. And then they got 1 attack through.
Ouch.
Yeah, so that was almost, it would almost be better off if they failed that. But it was a really, really tight game. It's a really, really interesting game. I found the Kronspine in John's list an incredibly tough piece to play around. Where Gargants aren't a list I necessarily want to run into, but they're not one that I don't feel like I can beat either. Fulminators will usually, ignoring what I just said happened to me, we usually take a Gargant out in one combat phase. But the Kronspine really throws a spanner in the works because there's something now that exists that I can't get rid of in one go. I've got enough shooting to stop it, but I don't really want to put all my shooting into something that's not going to die when I'm trying to whittle down the Gargants as fast as possible.
And I'd be dying to ask you, how did you handle the Kronspine? Because I've got the Judicators with the crossbow, so I can, at range, I can shoot him off pretty easily from either a shooting attack, and then if it charges me, I can unleash hell, and I'll kill that Kronspine. I've got no concern at all. But you don't have nearly as much volume, and you're a lot more melee. So how did you find the Kronspine? What did you do? if you had your time again, how would you handle it if it didn't go the way that you wanted it to?
I ignored the Kronspine. I've actually got more shooting than you'd think. You'd probably find that output-wise, I output the same in shooting as you do. Partly as well because I've got the Raptors that shoot twice in a turn at some point, which is usually a pretty nice boost of damage during a game. But I just didn't feel like I could sink damage where, Gargants are very much almost like a race. You're trying to get as much damage as quickly as possible so you can free the board up for yourself. Maybe not as much as the last edition where they were also usually going 4 points ahead of you immediately, but certainly there is somewhat of a race to try and get them down as fast as possible. So I felt like just ignoring the Kronspine was my best choice. Hard to say whether that was necessarily the best option in the end, but I'm going to see if we can work out if he's in the picture. I don't think that's right, but he ended up coming onto my objective in the corner, and this is where the Nidus paths were really interesting. I teleported my Raptors and my Lord Relictor out of there, so his Kronspine ended up just kind of stuck in not stuck, but in no man's land for a turn, because I basically used the Nidus path to disappear over to the other side and steal his objective on the other end of the board. So yeah, but I really like the Kronspine and Gargants. I think it's a really nice little combo.
Yeah, I run a double gate breaker with a Kronspine and a Kraken Eater. So I actually run 3 Megas and Kronspine. So I like how Jonathan had 2 Man Crushers, 3 Man Crushers in Bounty Hunters as well. And it has 10 attacks with the club, the headbutt. It can do a lot of damage. The thing that you should learn from Megas is that they don't do the damage. It's the Man Crushers that do the damage. So good combination there with the Bounty Hunters.
Yeah, definitely.
So you lost this game.
I dropped this one.
Right?
It was close, but they ended up I ended up just really not being able to score much in the last round, and by that point I was, I think, maybe a point behind, and then 1 point in the last round or 2 points in the last round, and no grand strat. And my grand strat was to kill all of his battle line, which is a tough ask versus Gargants.
Yeah, it can be. It absolutely can be. So you're 1-1. I went up against Sylvaneth, and it's funny, actually, because the week prior, I was at a local one-day tournament, my RTT at the Dice Arcade, and there was a lovely lady there who was running Sylvaneth, and I haven't actually played the new Sylvaneth book. No one really plays it, at least around me. So I grudged her. I said, I want to see what this does. I want to see Strike and Fade. I want to see the Revenants. I want to see what Kurnoth Hunters do. Give me the works. And it was a great game with Ali when I played at the RTT. And that experience actually really helped me against Tim. So Tim was running Sylvaneth, Heartwood, to a lot of Kurnoth Hunters, and probably not as many Revenant Seekers that I would have expected. Most people, I've spoken to Laurie Huggett Wild, I've spoken to a lot of people, and 6 Seekers, 9 Seekers seems to be the number. And what was really interesting as well is he'd run the Kurnoth Hunters with bows. Certainly not what I was expecting. I see swords, I see scythes, but the bows. And I'll be honest, I was not impressed with the bows. Their output, from what Tim tells me, he uses the Kurnoth Hunters with bows to clean up whatever the War Song can't kill with the mortal wounds that it does through its signature War Scroll spell. But for the 500 odd points that you're spending with the Kurnoth Hunters with great bows, it didn't do a lot of damage. It didn't kind of do a lot against me. Tim actually had 1 drop, so and probably to his detriment, he tried to get into me turn 1. So he put his Kurnoth Hunters with scythes and his Revenants and the Arch Rev. They all went at me turn 1, and they all failed the charge. He failed to have his Spite Swarm Hive in range for the Kurnoth Hunters, so they weren't able to get the +3 to their charge. And he was just standing out there in the middle of the board. So I charged the Chariot, I did the Annihilators, I dropped the Dragons in for the charge. He used his tree revs to kind of start sneaking around my objectives to start scoring early. My Vanquishers went in there with its double damage against Bounty Hunters. And I think I won turn 2 as well. I think I won the top of the turn 2. So I got a double turn between 1 and 2. and then my damage was just kind of went through, and lifting like 1,000 points of his army really quickly really kind of only meant he had like the Kurnoth Hunters, the War Song, and like, oh, I killed the Seekers in turn 1 too. I killed them with the Chariots. I think the Chariot charged in a little bit of cleanup with the Dragons, but yeah, it was a bit too aggressive, and I think that kind of went against him, and it ended 28-17. I don't think he scored his last battle tactic just because he just lost too much bodies in the early game.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of Sylvaneth players in WA, surprisingly. I can think of maybe 4 or 5 off the top of my head. Don't know why we love the tree so much over here, but we do. I find Sylvaneth to be a real risky matchup for Stormcast. Those scythes will cut through everything we have. And Strike and Fade means that we don't even have that kind of counter punch that we usually do. But like you said, they can. I guess the biggest issue with Sylvaneth is they do, maybe even worse than Stormcast, they just don't have a lot of bodies. So, yeah.
And I think the interesting thing for me with this particular matchup was that you had 3 layers of movement shenanigans. You had the trees, whether they're jumping in and out of trees through Strike and Fade or just walking the spirit paths from the Overgrown and the Wildwoods. You then had the teleport shenanigans from the Tree Revenants, and you then had the movement shenanigans from the Battle Plan. So, and as you know, once you come down from Stormcast with Signs of the Storm, once you're down, you're down. So it was about keeping my movement model, so my Chariot, my Dragons, my Prime, and trying to be smart, protecting objectives, and not being outmaneuvered. I think that was kind of the key to me. And losing some of those key melee threats meant that it was just like the bows and like the war songs weren't getting into combat. So I think if we had his time again, the melee threats would still be around, and that would be a real pain in the butt for me.
Yeah. I find against Sylvaneth, they really test how well you screen and how well you move your models up the board. If you prevent them from getting in, you can, once you've reached them, it's almost game over with them just because they just don't have the bodies. But I will say as well, I met Tim there. We went and had lunch on the first day. Lovely guy. Was driving up like an hour and 15 every day to get there from, I don't know where, somewhere in the middle of the mountains. But yeah. Great guy.
One of his mates is one of my club. One of his club mates is a mate of mine, Damien. And I sent him a message. I said, "Look who I'm playing." He's like, "Smash him for me." So I'll blame this loss, Tim's loss, for Damo. So yeah, I'm currently 2-1. You're 1-1. And we go into the third game of day 1, and you get to play one of my mates, the watermelon man himself, Austin, with his big Waaagh.
Yes. So I actually met Austin on Friday night because you invited me and my friends out for dinner, which was really lovely, and got to meet the man himself. And then, we got matched up in the last game of the day, and it was an intimidating game because I'd watched him eat a quarter of a watermelon over lunch. And that's a lot of energy that I don't have. But this was shaping to be a really, really good game. My takeaway from this is that Austin's a very, very good player. He strikes me as someone who really understands the game. And it was a very cagey start to this game. I was being very careful to stay out of his ranges, just using my shooting to pick off what I could of his. I've only ever played Big Well once before, and that game was a disaster because the Wargog Prophet basically destroyed half my army in one go. So I was being very careful to stay away from that Wargog. It was very back and forth, and basically got to end of 2 where I'd taken an opportunity to open up the side of his flanks, put my Fulminators in, wiped the whole half side of his board, basically, left all his heroes exposed, and then lost the roll, and the Wargog removed a unit of Fulminators. So unfortunately, the game ended up being a bit of a stinker for me because I think the Wargog ended up removing 6 Fulminators, the Lord Relictor, something else maybe, I can't remember. Some disgusting number of points. I clearly don't have any luck versus Wargogs. We got to round 4, He rolled a 4 for the damage on the Wargog, and that after 2 games of Wargog is the first time I found out he's doing D6 damage to himself. I always thought it was D3 because of how little damage I've ever seen a Wargog do to itself.
He rolls a 1. So I played Austin the week prior. I played Austin the week prior, and the week prior, Austin, with his Wargog Prophet, killed 2 dragons, a prime, 10 of the 12 wounds off my chariot, and maybe the 3 annihilators. He rolled 6s on his priority every single time. He would do a whole bunch of wounds to me, and when he rolled the 1, he'd always roll one mortal wound, and his tattoo gives it a 4-up ward, and he just shrug it off. And what really hurts you, and one thing I love about Austin's list is the combination with the Bolt Boys. So he always has the Bolt Boys, the Shaman, and the Wargog together. So the Bolt Boys are shooting off with mortal wounds. And 2 games prior, Austin did 22 mortal wounds from 1 round of shooting from those Bolt Boys. He spiked, just rolled 5s and 6s, except for one didn't hit. But you got to get in range to get to the Bolt Boys, unless you've got long range threats. And in my list, I don't have that damage. The other cool piece I love about Austin's list is the Mega Boss there with the Destroyer. And he's such a great trade piece because he fights on death. So if you ignore him and he just runs you up like a suicide missile, he just goes in and carves. And once you get into combat, even if he dies, he just fights on death and he does a whole bunch of damage. And there's still 2 units of pigs to come.
Yeah, that was I think if the Wargog hadn't kind of ended the game where it did, that was probably the biggest threat, and the thing that really caught me the most off guard is that he was very, very cagey, really screening out, making sure that I always usually keep 1 Fulminators in the sky and 1 on the ground so that I've got the best of both worlds, essentially. And he's really screening me out so I couldn't bring anything down to hit him like that. And I was, with how cagey he was being, it was a real shock to have that Mega Boss just suddenly go screaming down the middle of the board straight through my lines. I think he ended up rolling like a 10-inch charge on him as well, which meant he was just right in the middle, and that ended up being a huge issue for me as well because he killed the Fast Riders and a bunch of Judicators, and really just blew open the middle of my middle of my game, and really is the reason that I was relying on a double turn for those Fulminators rather than maybe being able to wait it out a little bit longer.
Yeah, I've been in that situation many times where I've tried to get in to kill those Bolt Boys. He rolls nothing but 6s on that priority roll, and it's just stare range. And I just gotta hope to the dice gods. But I'm being told from some other people that Austin's Shaman has killed a whole bunch of like Vermin Lords, and it's just like he's an absolute beast. But I mean, so sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, I think from this we really should just ask everyone to email GW and ask them to put the Wargog up to 250 points, and at worst, just put Austin's up to 250 points because he clearly shouldn't be allowed to have it.
It's 14 drops. He doesn't care about the drop wars, and there's a lot of great threats there too. I know he's thinking about dropping the Iron Skull Boys for. I can't remember what he's thinking about dropping it for, but it's a great list. It's a great list, and it's great to see Big Waaagh. And I've had a couple of discussions on the channel before. Big Waaagh is a great list tech type of faction, and you can really do some cool stuff. So, and I know he's got like a more crusher that he's thinking about. My game 3 was so you're currently 1 win, 2 losses.
Yes.
Yep, 1 and 2. So I come up against my teammate Jared Baker, who is so we're going up to a teams tournament in November. Jared is in my team along with Joel and Pete from the Plastic Crack blog. And first time we played against each other, and he brought his daughters of Khaine with the snake spam. Boy, oh boy, does this hurt. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit tired of this game 3, and I won the priority roll. I won the drop in turn 1, and I went, you know what? I want to kill some stuff. I want a quick game. So I dropped my Annihilators in turn 1, and I just went into that screen. Dumb move. But I was at that point where I just wanted the game to be ending, to be honest. It was a really tight game. It ended 16-15. I actually won the battle tactics. It's just that I failed my grand strategy and he didn't. So it was 15 battle tactics to me, 13 to him. But with him scoring his 3 for the grand strategy, it turned to 16-15. It was a tight as nail game. As I mentioned, I failed that dragon 5-inch charge. He did some shenanigans with me with Crystal Touch, which he touched me, and I should probably report into the police, where my prime and one of my dragons were in combat with a unit of 10 snakes. And he fought all of his attacks against the prime, and I think he might have killed the prime. And then he used his Crystal Touch into the dragons, and he did 10 mortal wounds into my last dragon, despite the dragon not getting the attack. And I really don't like that, but it is a legal shenanigans.
That used to be the Evocator touch, so they've stolen it from us.
Yeah, I just don't like the fact that he fought the prime, but then he could do damage to a completely different unit. It's like, it reminds me a lot of like Fire Slayers, where you do like the splashback mortals and you can do damage, but it goes into the unit you're fighting. But Dragon died. That combat kind of collapsed. I killed his Slaughter Queen on Cauldron pretty quickly. That was a big priority of mine. I wanted to pull that down as quick as possible to stop him rallying those snakes on a 4+, because they're the damage threats, and I needed to stop them from coming back, especially before the Heart of Fury went up. So I basically killed it, I think, by turn 2. But then the snakes just kept going, and I think he might have got the priority between 2 and 3. It was tough, and nails. Look, I was pretty happy despite being a bit of a potato early on. I think if I had my time again, I would have charged the Vanquishers as opposed to the Annihilators. I got a little bit cocky with, I thought what I should have done is I should have measured to see if my Annihilator mortal wounds on the charge, or on the drop, would have actually tapped the cauldron, and it didn't. It was actually just out of range, and I should have measured in advance, but I didn't. And it kind of meant that I didn't kill what I really wanted to kill, and it was a poor trade. It was a poor trade. So it was a great back and forth game. Despite it, I was really happy to score 5 out of 5 of my battle tactics. So despite the loss, sorry, I scored 4 out of my 5. I failed one of them. I failed head to head, but and I think that's the only battle tactic I failed the whole tournament. I scored 24 out of 25 battle tactics, which I was really happy with, considering this is my first 2-dayer.
Yeah, that's very good.
But yeah, it was a great game. And it was nice to see Daughters of Khaine, because I think a lot of my experience recently has been against my mate Liam. And he definitely runs his snakes a little bit differently. It was kind of great to see just how bad they are. They're mean.
How were the Heart Renders? Because, obviously they're usually there to score the Daughters of Khaine battle tactics, but now they're not there.
In this particular tournament, because we were only doing the battle tactics, look, I think they contributed to things like desecrate their lands, and they obviously screened out as well, but like they weren't really a threat. Like they did a couple of chip damage at best, but Stormcast had pretty high armor saves. So they actually didn't do a lot. It was very much the snakes. The Gur Battle Mage was a nice touch as well to kind of get the +2 to run and charge. Especially because like Witch Elves, for example, can run and charge. So if you put the Gur Battle Mage spell on them, they can go really far, incredibly fast. Yeah. So I lost that one, as I mentioned, 16-15. So I'm currently 2 wins, 1 loss. Good game. And there was no Morathi as well, which I think was fascinating too, because he's just got more points in the snakes.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more cauldrons coming into the meta though.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think there's definitely, you don't have to take Morathi if you are a Daughters of Khaine player. Yes, you don't get to do the double fight or the double shoot. And he did have a unit of 10 bow snakes, but what you lose from not having Morathi, you gain so much by having a second unit of 10 combat snakes. So yeah, really good. Game 4, you're up against Liam Robertson with in the Silk Steel Nests, which is what's that one again? That's the
8. So 4 on each area, and then you can burn them, and you got to take a bravery test for mortal wounds when you do so. So this was my chance to avenge my loss to Gargants. against Liam, who was really lovely. His army is incredibly well painted. It was my pick for best army. It was just such a nicely painted. Just each Gargant just had so much attention to detail, which having painted one Gargant, I think is impressive because I painted the skin nice to my Gargant and then completely lost patience to do anything else on it. So the fact that he's gone all the way through and he's even edge highlighted all the little bits of like leather on the, like the lizard skin or the dinosaur skin that's like on one of the cuffs, he's like, oh, just ridiculous. Who has that time? But yeah, this was an interesting game. I had a real pattern through this tournament, which is that I started every day really well, and then everything went south immediately. But I think I left day one going, okay, I didn't get all the luck I wanted there. Maybe I didn't get the matchups I wanted. That's fine. We'll come in tomorrow, and it's got to turn around. And boy, did it for Paul against Paul Liam. The story of this is he failed to kill a unit of Aether Wings with his War Stomper, charged his Gatebreaker into my Lord Relictor, did 2 damage total, and charged his Kraken Eater into the Vanguard Raptors and did 5 damage and left them alive. And that you can tell where the game went from there. I learned from yesterday, so the Fast Riders were absolutely invaluable in this one. They just spent the entire game bouncing objective to objective the whole way through, scoring points, and I ended up burning all 4 of his back objectives for a 20-0. It was a game that I think I probably was in a good spot for anyway. But yeah, that was some of the worst dice I've seen in a while. Like I whiffed badly on my Fulminators when they attacked the day before. He whiffed with all 3, 1,500 points worth of absolute nothing.
Is that your game? Is that it?
That was it.
Well, did that trend happen to me at the exact same time? So I played your mate Alex.
Yeah,
boy, oh boy, did my dice betray me. Is this the biggest betrayal I have had? So I played against Alex's Nurgle. Really cool, by the way. His Great Unclean one was converted or kit bashed from the old one. There was if anyone's seen at the old Warhammer, like the Great Unclean one is like literally that big. It's so small, but he built it up and with the base, and it was really cool and wonderfully painted army, by the way. Gentleman and a scholar, Alex, such a nice person, but he was not nice to me on the table. The game started with his Nurgling. He took first. I gave away first. I'm like, look, they're not that fast. I can kind of give it away. I'm feeling quite comfortable. He had some Nurglings pop up quite early on. They've got to come out of terrain in my side of the board in turn 1. He went on to continually win every priority roll, and every one of my charges basically failed. And I think if you look at my sheet, you'll see it says can't catch a fucking break, because every dice roll that I could possibly try to do, the Annihilators failed. The dice god blessed Alex because he started with his wheel on a 4, which is the magic number, right? So it started off with something like I didn't get a heroic action in turn 1. Turn 2, I couldn't pile in. Turn 3, and it was just because he got his play, he got his flies into me in turn 2, which means I couldn't pile in, so he tagged, and it was the momentum. It was a really good game, don't get me wrong, but I found that the momentum was never on my side, and everything that I tried to do, I could never swing the momentum in my favor. Probably the highlight for me was probably in turn 3, I was able to kill the Great Unclean one with Prime and Dragons. But outside of that, it was just one of those games where Alex just kept the lead up, and no matter what I did and what I tried, I couldn't get close. So in the end, it finished 30-22, which is still not bad. It was my worst defeat. but it was one of those ones where if the Annihilators did hit the charge, it could have changed the game a little bit. If I'd won a priority roll other than turn 5's priority roll, I think I could have swung some of the momentum. But it was just one of those games where the grind that Nurgle is known for, it got me. It got me good. But it was a great game.
Yeah, I mean, I've played, as you'd imagine, doing a friend and a club mate. I've played this list and his various Nurgle lists a lot of times. And if Alex goes up on you in points, boy, you better hope you get every dice roll you need at that point, because he plays a very, very tight game. And he won't give you 3 points. You've got to get him. And if you just a couple of bad dice rolls, and it's just, you may as well pack up, because it's hard.
He beat you with a smile. And look, he played a great game. Don't get me wrong, but the game plan really for me was because I knew his 2 flies were coming up the flank. He had the Great Unclean one and the 2 blocks of Plague Bearers in Expert Conquerors. I knew that he had so many wounds coming at me. I needed to pull down a flank quickly. So I was hoping the dragons could pull down the 2 plague drones, the Puskor Blight Lords. I thought the dragons could pull that down and they could swing in the middle of the board. And I was hoping, like on the other side, I could at least pull them down and then kind of concentrate in the middle. Unfortunately, that momentum swing didn't happen. So it meant that I was fighting in 3 spots that I was never going to win that grind with the disease tokens, the summoning that happened through contagion, the Expert Conqueror Plague Bearers, especially if he got that spell off to give them an extra wound, just made the Plague Bearers incredibly hard, as well as like getting the trees on. It was a great game, don't get me wrong, but I needed some momentum and I couldn't get it. I just couldn't get it. It was just one of those games.
Yeah. I mean, I remember very clearly walking over to your table in the middle of this game after mine had ended abruptly. And I went, "How's the game going?" And you turned to me and I went, "I'm never playing Fulminators again." Annihilators again. I was like,
Annihilators, they just kept failing me. They just kept failing me.
And I don't think you got much solace out of me, because I was just like, "I told you at dinner that they're rubbish," and walked off.
Oh, so I'm 2-2 at this point. So 2 wins, 2 losses. You're 2-2. You're 2-2. So we're both 2-2. The final game is you're up against a legend. I love this man, Shem. Shem with his Skaven, and call that a little bit earlier in the chat. If you look in the top right-hand corner, you'll see your Fulminators have a banner with your face on it, which I think is just wonderful. But you're up against Shem and his Skaven. A little bit different to my Skaven. The Skaven I played against was all about the mortal wounds from especially like the war machines. But what was going on here with this one, and what was Shem like?
So this is an interesting one. I felt very confident going into this one. This is a list that I would give myself a real chance to win any day of the week. Spoilers, I lost. It's a lot of Rat Ogres, which I think are fantastic. I really like Rat Ogres. I think they've got really great output. There are a lot of wounds for the points. Even though there's only two models, there are a lot of wounds. I think they hit really hard. A big story of this one, and Shem will back this up, is that my Fulminators failed me again. I had a unit that basically got stuck. You can actually see at the setup area where you can see my hands. You can see my little tattoo on my hand there, where my 4 Fulminators are piled into the Skaven of the deep strike and attacked me. My Fulminators ended up going behind that house, getting stuck there for about 2 turns, and then losing in combat to some clan rats and a rat ogre. And that the house was 100% the MVP of that game. And that was not good, because if they hadn't failed so badly, they would have held what was quite a large block of Shem's list up. They also managed to battle shock themselves off on a 6, the only number they could fail. If there was anything they could fail, they failed it. They rolled a 4 on a charge where I needed a 6 to get into his clan rats. They failed to kill the clan rats when they finally did get in combat. They got stuck behind a house and they battle shocked off a 6. It was maybe the worst I've ever seen a unit of Fulminators do, and that's including the day before when they failed the Gargant. But
by the way, Jonathan's saying, and it's actually funny because at the next tournament, I'm thinking of bringing in Fulminators. So maybe you need to hand me your Fulminator license.
Yeah,
I'll take them on and I'll see what I can do with them.
Thankfully, all my Fulminators are magnetized, so they can be Tempesters as well. But it was a very close game. We unfortunately had to calculate the last little bit and ended up being a 3-point win to Shem. But it was one of those games that really could have gone either way if we managed to play it out. Especially as it's on close to the chest, so you've got the alpha objectives scoring those extra points. I think the highlight of this one was I managed to shoot his the Hell Pit Abomination off to the wound right off the board, and then Shem immediately rolled a 6 to bring it back. So that was great. That was like, I don't know, 700 points worth of shooting models or something that just came straight back in. But rolled a 1 on the wounds, so it had 1 wound. So it forced me, I had to charge my Castigators across the board into the Hell Pit Abomination to try and take that last wound. They failed in combat, but thankfully my Suicide Bomber tactics worked, and they managed to roll a single 6 on the way out and take it off the board again. So I did have to give up a unit of Castigators to get rid of something I'd already killed, but well worth it, I think. But yeah, it was a fun game and a good way to end the tournament, and unfortunately, another close loss to me.
I've become a real fan of Slinks, the Skittershank, the Underworld's Warband. Between him and his Claw Pack, it's a great little combination. I'm surprised that Shem would do Rat Ogres in units of 2. I thought he would at least do a reinforced unit of Rat Ogres, especially with the Master Molder being able to spend that CP, and on a 3+, the whole unit comes back. I guess units of 2, you've got 3 chances because you've got double Master Molder, but it's interesting.
You've got the free way to bring it back as well. I think there was a free way to bring more back, and I guess the idea is maybe if you're rolling it more times, you're more likely to bring a few back rather than a unit of 4. I guess if you fail, that's immediately you've just lost all 4 of them.
Yeah. No, look.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say as well, the Slink was very good, and that's probably the biggest issue I had as well, because Shem handed me the War Scroll because I was like, oh, I haven't seen his War Scroll. He goes, oh, here's the War Scroll. Read it, completely missed that they have a 6-inch deep strike. So I was perfectly zoned out for 9 inches, and then suddenly he just starts putting him down, and I'm like, oh, they're a bit close. And he's like, what are you talking about? I told you they're 6 inches, and I'm just, oh shit. Well, what do you do?
It happened to me, but at least then it allowed me to use, in a different game, and not against Shem, but somebody else, I was able to use this one's mine because he was able to get so close to my general. So I'm like, right, now my idiot general can go in and kill something. So Shem's a great opponent, and it would have been an absolute ball of a game, I know. So you finished on 2-3. So 2 wins, 3 losses. And I come up against a list that a very similar list. So I went up against Stephen Ox King and his Nighthawk. So I had a game against Stephen a couple of weeks ago, and it did not go well for me. I charged my dragons in, and I failed a 3-inch rerollable charge. And my 700 point double dragon, like my 700 points of dragons, just got charged with Scarlet Doom. So for anyone who doesn't know, Nighthawk can retreat and charge. And then within Scarlet Doom, those Bladegeist Revenants can do mortal wounds on the charge on a 5-up. So you roll a dice for every model. So on average, you should do 6 to 7 mortal wounds. And then he double turned me, rinse and repeat. And my things just got mortal wound off on the charge. So that happened in the last game. And I changed my list specifically for Stephen because I'm like, right, last time I didn't have the tools to handle Nighthawk because I was too heavily invested in Rend. I had a reinforced unit of dragons, and I just didn't have the damage to handle Nighthawk. So I'd reworked the list. I'd added the Judicates with crossbows. I had the Annihilators to do some mortal wounds on the drop and on the charge. The Chariot, I don't think I had in the old list. So I specifically was concerned about Nighthawk, and it was ironic that I actually came up against Nighthawk in my very last game. And Stephen plays a great game. He's been playing Nighthawk for a while now, and he's been playing a list very similar to this. I think he's made some minor tweaks here and there, but it's been fundamentally the same list. I had won this game, so he castled up really early on, and one of the things that I tried to do is try to pull this castle apart, because as you can see, the way that this list works is it's based around the Cruciator, who's backed up by the Spirit Host, who can take the wounds for the Cruciator. You can then bring back bodies through various abilities. Reichner can do some serious casting for that Purple Sun, and the Purple Sun really has no negatives against Nighthawk. They don't care less about the rend. And sure, you can kill on a roll of a 1, you kill one idiot. Whoop-de-doo. He's got so much regeneration in his army, it doesn't matter. But he kind of went turn 1, kind of started taking up the board, and I started to kind of piecemeal and try to pull the army apart. So, you know, as some of the army went to the bottom, then went out, I'd kind of maneuvered my dragons and kind of started pulling together and pulling certain units out. And one of the concerns that I had was he's protecting his Blade Geists by his Chain Rasps and his Dread Harridans, and was screening really well. And if I charge those idiots, then I've just made the Blade Geist charge really easy for him. And then on a double, he could then again retreat and charge and just do all those mortal wounds that I just can't handle. But it didn't go that way. I was able to kind of pull him apart. And I mentioned game one where the Prime completely failed me. I mentioned this whole string, the Annihilators have failed me. This was the game of redemption. The Annihilators made a 11-inch charge. The Prime, the Blade Geist went, I think it was 2 units. It was either 1 unit or 2 units. I think it was 1 unit of 20 went into the Prime. And between all of the damage that went into the Prime, I think he only took 1. I rolled every ward save that could possibly rolled. So, and there was, I think I was up in like turn 2 or turn 3, and he had, I think, eye for an eye, and he was trying to kill the Prime for eye for the eye, but that ward save, he failed the battle tactic because of the ward save. And then from there, the momentum was on my side. You know, I had the dragons, I had the Annihilators, the Vanquishers. I had a whole bunch of things doing their thing, and it kind of broke away from us. So I won that game 28-20. Like, you know, it was a great game, and it was a great redemption story for me, because I was concerned about Nighthawk, and I was concerned about does this list now handle Scarlet Doom, and the answer was yes. It was good. Sorry, what does Blake say? I remember checking in on you before the game, and I was shaking my boots. Yeah, I was having scars. I was having flashbacks of Scarlet Doom, because on the double, all of those, I think Ox King, last time I played him, he did like 10 mortal wounds from the 20 blade guy. So like there was some high spikes. But this one, it just didn't go that way. So it was a great game. It was wonderful to have that redemption story that I needed. And it was good to see that the thinking that I had in my list actually played out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Nighthawk's here to stay. Nighthawk's here to stay. And if you're not thinking about Nighthawk, you'll get rolled by them.
Yeah, this won't be the only Nighthawk. I mean, I know Scarlet Doom's the popular Nighthawk list at the moment, but there's a lot of play through all of that book. And they are an interesting matchup for my wife plays Nighthawk, so this is Stormcast v Nighthawk is the matchup for me. It's the one I play the most. So it's probably the book I know the second best, purely from playing against it. And it's
Soul Wars.
Yeah, it is basically. And it's it's an interesting play. Did you manage to shoot that Cruelgast out? Is that what you ended up doing?
I got him right at the end, but
okay. So you just took the most
thing,
through.
Well, no, because a lot of the things that I was doing outside of combat. I avoided combat, and I was using shooting and the dragon breath to do the damage. The other thing that I was doing is I was trying to shoot at the Cruciator, and he was bouncing his mortal wounds obviously back to the Spirit Hosts, and you don't then get the ward. So I was hopefully getting the Spirit Hosts away, so that when I needed to get to the Cruciator, he had nobody to bounce wounds back to. But I tried to avoid terror as much as possible. So when I attacked, I charged my dragon, my prime, the annihilators, and the chariot all at the same time.
Cool.
That was the thinking going in, because if I went in piecemeal, he'd then get his Cruciator -1 damage, and that's what I didn't want to do. So when I went into, let's say, the 10 chain rafts, I went in with the goal of killing them, so that the wave of terror and the Cruciator stuff just wasn't in play.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the good thing for your list as well is that you had the Celestin Prime, who I think is really good against Nighthawk. Because they struggle a little bit against mortal wounds, and the fact that he just sits there and just bombs them all over the board and hits multiple units is huge.
Yeah, the scepter was big, because he had his castle, right? He had the Hex Wraiths, he had, I think, 1 Spirit Torment, the Cruciator, maybe even 1 unit of the Dread Sides. They were all within that 3-inch bubble. So I was able to point my scepter, do the damage. Then the Annihilators went. Then the Annihilators came down. They did their mortal wounds within 10 inches. Then went into the charge, did the mortal wounds. Chariot went in, mortal wounds. So I just did a concentrated wave at one time.
Yeah, I mean, Stormcast has so much mortal wound capacity in it. I think sometimes people don't realize just the sheer volume of mortal wounds you can pull out of a Stormcast list. Can be pretty gross at times, especially when we're all on 3-up saves and prancing.
Well, I don't have the long strike, so I'm pulling mine from a different place. But and to be honest with you, most of my games, again, you asked the tournament organizers, my dragons, most breath attacks, I rolled a 1 or a 2. I rolled so little mortal wounds from my dragons, but against Ox King, I rolled 5s and 6s for days. It was just every other game they did nothing. So this was my redemption story for the units that had underperformed through the tournament. But I won that game. I did 5 out of 5 battle tactics. It finished 28-20, close game, but the damage was done kind of turn 3 to turn 4. And those key pieces, like his screens were gone, the Harridans were kind of on their way out. So the Blade Geist were kind of on their way out. So it was a bit tough.
I'm going to shout out to Ox King as well, because we ended up going out to dinner with him on Sunday night, and he was a fantastic human, very, very funny.
Yeah, great guy. He's one of my locals. Really nice guy, wonderful painted. And by the way, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there is a couple of the photos that I took for people who set up their armies for best painted. You can see Austin in the top corner. Ox King with his Nighthorn is down the bottom. Matt, you were talking about the Mega Gargant army, and I believe, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, the top left is that wonderfully painted Megas.
Yep, that's the Gargants I played against. Very well painted thing. So,
but it was great. Like, you we had some wonderful looking Nighthaunt. You had lovely Skaven. We had some Slaves to Darkness that looked amazing. You had OBR. There was some wonderful looking armies. I wish my army was ready for parade, but it was just barely scraping in for battle ready. Sorry, battle ready is the term I'm looking for. But Ox King, actually, I think he won best painted, didn't he? Or was it the Slaves?
Best painted was to the Slaves to Darkness.
Yes. Yep. So lovely. And then there's the final standing. So Dalton with the Bone Splitters came first. Terrence with his Sons. This was really interesting, actually, because your Jonathan Byrne, your second round opponent, played Terrence in round 4. So it was Sons versus Sons on a battle plan with 8 objectives. And in Terrence's list, he had Kragnos. And in Jonathan's list, he had Kronspine. So it was just this absolute Gargant versus Gargant smash in the face. Sorry, by the way, Ox got coolest army, and it was tied with Keith. So Very, very cool. Yes, I thought he was a part of the best painted kind of section. So it was great to kind of see that kind of bash fest. Sam, one of your boys from Perth, went third with Lumineth, 50 Sentinels, the dirty boy.
Yeah.
Dirty
Great.
boy. Dirty
Love playing that list. I'm not even joking.
Dirty boy. Jacob Strachan with his Zench. Alex, my opponent, that Nurgle opponent, with his Nurgle. So interesting. 2 of the top 10 were coming from WA. Tyson with Fangs of Sotek. I came 8th with my Stormcast, Austin 9th, and then shout out to Pat Nevin at the bottom too. Blades of Corn, but he was a mortal Blades of Corn. So not the Boom Thirster with Scarbrand and all the Boom Boys. It was purely mortals. So that's big dick energy there.
Yeah.
And you can see the town, the little sleepy town at the top.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good top 10. It's nice to why play 40k when you have a top 10 like that where it's just so varied and so interesting.
Well, I think what was interesting as well was that outside of Nighthaunt, where there was 4 Nighthaunt lists at the tournament, most other factions really only had 1 or 2 at most. Like there wasn't really, any other blowout factions other than, as I mentioned, the Nighthaunt.
Yeah, I think it was 20 factions the whole tournament. So of the 24, it was 20 factions, I think, which is a wild spread.
Which makes it all the better with the Sister Paper Rock, right? I'm being told that 30 Reavers of Pat Nevins had killed 6 Colonel. That's pretty good, those damn Reavers. But what was your highlight of the tournament?
The highlight was really just how fun the whole thing was. I guess there's always that worry coming across to the other side of Australia or other side of any country that you're going to turn up, you'll play some games, and you'll just kind of sit in the corner like a sort of sad, weird loser, and no one wants to talk to you. But no, you messaged me on Friday night. We came out and had dinner with you and a couple of your mates, and that it was nice to have some friendly faces the next day. But then there was, I think it was great that the guys then had drinks, down at the George Hotel, wherever it was, that night as well. So there's a bunch of other people, and then Sunday we went out with different people again. So I think we ended up having drinks and dinner with maybe half the tournament crowd, and it was just a blast. And it's kind of what you want, right? Like the game's very good fun, but it's very much a community thing. It's about enjoying life. So that was really the highlight, was just how well received, I guess, we were over there, and how well we were looked after by the locals and the East Coasters.
It was a good mix, right? Because you had the locals from Bathurst and the surrounding areas. You had a bunch of people traveling from the north, so the Newcastle, Central Coast, Maitland kind of crew. Then you also had, you lot and the Sydney crew. So it's not like the tournament was run by only locals and everyone knew each other. It was a real good melting pot. And I think to back up what you just said, and for anyone who has never been to a tournament, is thinking about going to a tournament, maybe you don't know many people, at least from my experience, we're all here for the same thing, and that is to play Warhammer. We all have something in common. If nothing more, I can say to the random person, how'd you go? And it was great because people were hanging around. One cool thing that they did was they had like BYO, so you could bring your own alcohol, and people were just having drinks, and it was nice and sunny most of the time. So people were just on the balcony having a chit chat. It was very, very social, despite what it looks like a very small community center. It was a very competitive, but also very social event. So if anyone's thinking about going to Bathurst or anything like that, I would highly recommend it. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I went. Yeah,
it was definitely the right kind of competitive for the most part. It was a lot of people who brought their filth, brought their cheese, and they just had a beer with you and a laugh, which is the way I prefer to play. I love competitive Warhammer, but I don't need to lose sleep over it. I want to play hard and then party less hard because I'm in my 30s and I can't really party that hard anymore.
As Blake's saying in the chat as well, Warhammer has made me most of the best friends I have now. I have so many wonderful friends that I've met through Warhammer, and people I've just met at a tournament that I've seen them again at a tournament, or I've talked to them after the tournament. We've had more games after the tournaments. It's a wonderful snowball effect. But I guess maybe my last question, kind of before we wrap things up, is, what will you do differently going into your next event? So you've had this experience. Is your list going to change? Are you thinking about playing something new? What's on the horizon for you, Matt?
So horizon for me, we've got a one-dayer here in Perth in 2 weeks' time. I'm going to be running my Seraphon for that. More as an excuse because I've got two of my wonderful dinosaurs in grey plastic, and I really want to paint. I want an excuse to paint them up, so I'm going to roll them out, and they'll probably carry me through a couple of games because you can be half asleep and still win a game with Seraphon. But we actually have our Masters coming up fairly soon, and I'll be running Stormcast for that. So there's going to be some big changes to my list. A lot of stuff that didn't work, a lot of stuff that I think I previously decided was a bad idea that I had somehow in that time decided was a really good idea, and I've been reminded it was a bad idea, as you do. Maybe like running 2 lots of Fulminators, even though I spent an entire year being like, I'll never run 2 lots of Fulminators. It's redundant. But yeah, I mean, I'll make a few changes. I guess in Perth, I don't have to worry about space limit as well. So at worst come to worst, I'll just stick a Cron Spine in there, and that should take me to 3-2 comfortably.
It's interesting, actually, because one of the things that I had in my list was the Incantor. And maybe it's just my perception, because a lot of the opponents that I've been playing in the last couple of months have had that, like I said, the Soul Scream Bridge, they've had Locking the Boat, they've had Spell Portal, they've had some type of critical spell they've wanted to get off. And to be honest with you, actually, when I played Ox with the Purple Sun, I actually didn't try to unbind it till very late. I let it go. I'm like, I'm going to let this go. And I think if you play around it, you can avoid a lot of the damage output from Purple Sun. And I was able to avoid it. So I'm like, do I really need a Knight Incantor? And part of me wants to bring in a Relictor. Part of me wants to bring in a unit of 2 Fulminators. But like, as I reflect on my list, like if I drop the Dragons, because I think the Dragons are overcosted, I love the movement. I love the movement that the Dragons bring. So I love my Chariot. The Annihilators, I'm in a love-hate relationship right now. And I think I'm kind of like, if I didn't win that last game and they didn't hit that 11-inch charge, then I probably would drop them completely. But since they were so good to me in that last game, they're like that ex-girlfriend that I just can't stop calling occasionally when I'm drunk. I'm like, I just got to delete the number from the phone, but I won't. And occasionally I'm going to look at that screen and go, I remember when those Annihilators did 11-inch charge, and they did all those mortal wounds on the charge, and they just deleted everything. And I'm like, you're an attractive booty call at this time of night. So I don't know.
I agree with especially the Knight Incantor thing. I agree. I played absolutely no Magic all of last year. All last season, I didn't bother. There's no point. Our Magic sucks. It literally is there to stop the Purple Sun. So FAQ 1 week. No more ones to kill. Out of the list. Out the window. Don't care.
I will say that I'm a little bit tempted to bring in the Everblaze Comet. That's one thing I'm interested in, because like the Annihilators come in, do mortal wounds. Prime comes down, mortal wounds. The Comet, at that simultaneous attack, and it drops and does all the mortal wounds at a 10-incher. I'm like, I'm half tempted. I'm also tempted to bring back Krondus or Karazai. So I've got both of them that I'm like, maybe I'll just run them for lols.
I'll see your comment and say Night Vexillor. Does the same thing, gives you reroll charges, and don't even have to cast it.
No, but I've actually been thinking about it. So I was looking at an American list, and they ran 4 of the Vexillor, the banners, so for the teleport and charge. And I'm like, ooh, maybe Annihilators need that. But then I'm like, I already hate Annihilators. Why am I buying them flowers?
Nah, don't do it. Just get the bomb. Matt secretly a Fire Slayer.
Maybe.
Other than being really short, no.
So for anyone who doesn't know, by the way, I feel like we're kind of wrapping up. Like, it was a great tournament. We can keep talking about it, but I think kind of the point's been made. It was a great event. It was my first 2-dayer with Stormcast, so it was great to kind of see how I went in the gamut. I'm also not really tied to a list because all of my eyes is at LVO. So I'm going to LVO in January, as I've mentioned many times already. Yeah. And because the General's Handbook is meant to drop in December, and we know there's possibly an FAQ coming, or at least that, remember, like, we had the hunt and all that crap that came in the last middle of General's Handbook?
Yeah.
If that comes soon and Purple Sun gets nerfed, or Bounty Hunters becomes +1 to wound instead of +1 damage, or something else comes out in the book, I don't want to be too worried about a list, because a list can change. So at the moment, I'm like exploring the faction so that when it comes to the next General's Handbook, and whatever meta and objectives and battle pack stuff we've got, I've got enough experience with Fulminators, Dragons, Prime, Chariot, Liberators to at least make a quick decision.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll give you a tip then. Try 15 Sequitors.
I am tempted.
They're good. They're just too expensive, but too expensive can change very quickly.
True. I am tempted to do the Evocator bomb with Lachlan the Soulseeker. I am tempted. I know Toril, Jonathan in the chat, has been talking about doing Evocators on kitty cats. I think you can do 6 of them maybe in the boat range. Like that. I think Fulminators are my next try. And Krondus or Karazai. I wouldn't even mind trying to use Karazai.
Yeah, we'll do a Star Drake.
Actually, I tell you what I've been playing around with. Aventus with all the dragons. So I don't know.
Yeah, just who knows? Try things. You never know what's going to go down in points in about a week to 3 months' time.
See how we go. Yeah. Matt, I want to give you a shout out. Age of Something, great YouTube channel, 2-minute videos, very funny. What's the next one you're working on?
I've got 2 on the go, so maybe Gargants, maybe Skaven.
I mean, Gargants got a new book coming. Surely.
So, yeah, that's a good point. Actually, no, you know what? The Gargant video will be fine. I don't think I'm going to have to change much.
All right.
It's mostly criticism levied at the people who play them.
I will say though, you're right. If Plastic Valkyria comes in Khorne, I'm a Khorne player. I'm 100% a Khorne player the minute Valkyria gets an updated sculpt. If she gets Bellacord and gets a wonderful, obviously not the size of Bellacord, but a lovely new sculpt like Bellacord, I'm all in. I'm absolutely all in. I'm all in. All right, Matt, this has been awesome. Anyone you want to shout out? Anything like you want to say before we can bring it home?
I'm just going to shout out the entire WA scene for all being excellent and for cheering us on all weekend in chat. That was fantastic. Thanks so much, guys. And for all being in chat today as well.
Well, shout out to WA. Now that Uncle Mark has opened up the borders, Matt knows I work for a Perth-based company. So hopefully I get to come over pretty soon and I'll come play at Outpost and we'll hang out again. It's been a couple of years since I come over, but I'd love to see you all again, especially
sounds good.
Got a great community.
Yes, sounds good.
All right, well, let's go. Thanks, everyone, for joining in the chat. I hope you enjoyed this recap. If you did, let me know in the comment section because I will do another one. I was talking to Austin, the big Waaagh player. We've got one coming up at the start of October. We've got a little 2-dayer. So I might get Austin to come on and we'll talk a bit about Moab. But if you enjoyed this and you maybe have some feedback for us on how we do a better stream when it comes to like a recap, let us know in the comments. I'd be genuinely curious to hear from you because I really enjoyed this. This was fun.
Good.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Age of Something. Peace out. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the video description. I want to give a massive shout out as well to the AOS Coast Patreons and YouTube members who are going in and the funds of supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you're all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1 on a redeploy.